If you want to learn a lot about the Cyber Dragon archetype, in this video we're going to be breaking down just about every single card, all the rulings and interactions that I've learned over the last year or so. This video is basically my magnum opus of all my Cyber Dragon videos. I've been preparing for a video like this for a very long time. As I was learning more about the Cyber Dragon archetype from watching other videos and people on YouTube, as well as when people help correct me in the comment section, I was compiling all that information into a document. Everything I've learned and put into that document I want to put into a nice long form video to share with everybody. I want to say thank you to everybody in the Cyber Dragon community and whoever commented on my videos, and also make other content, because without everybody's collective wisdom I would not be able to make this video, I guess, and share it. I have done a lot of extensive research, however I am not a judge. I make mistakes, I'm not perfect. There will be some errors in this video and I will update anything in the description, so definitely check that out. Definitely let me know in the comments if there is any mistakes and if something needs to be clarified. I don't take it personally. We're just going to be discussing Cyber Dragon cards in this video, no Cyber Darks. We'll probably do that in a completely separate video. As much as I play the Cyber Dark engine, I don't know it enough where I feel comfortable to actually make a video like this for that yet. I did originally have a huge Word document with all this information, however I'm converting it to a Notion document thing. I don't know exactly what it's called, a Notion page. I would like to share this eventually. It's definitely not even close to being done. However, if I do complete this and share it, I will put it in the description of this video, and also I will post a link on the channel because I think it would be very helpful for the Cyber Dragon community. But again, that might take a while, so don't expect that in anytime soon. As new cards get released, this video might get a little outdated and will need to be updated, so we can do that accordingly. But in the meantime, hopefully you enjoy this video, hopefully you learn some things, and hopefully maybe I missed out on some things and you can educate me down below. So definitely if you want to learn more Cyber Dragon content, this video should help, but also see the comment section down below because there are people that know a lot more than me who can also help you as well. Let's get into some of the cards. We're going to go over some general things really quick, and one of the main things you need to know are the baby Cyber Dragons. When they are face up on the field or in the graveyard, their name is not, let's say, Cyber Dragon Nachster. Their name is Cyber Dragon. That is incredibly important to know. If these cards have their effects negated, they are no longer considered a Cyber Dragon. However, they are still Cyber Dragon monsters. As a reminder, Ash Blossom specifically does not negate the effect for these cards to be considered Cyber Dragons, because Ash specifically only negates the activation of an effect. Main example you'll face is when you play Cyber Dragon Core and your opponent ashes the effect. This name will still be Cyber Dragon when on the field. However, if your opponent plays something like Imperm, this card specifically says negate its effects, plural, its effects. So it will negate all the effects on the card. So if Core gets Impermed, its effect to search, it will get negated, as well as the ability for it to be named Cyber Dragon will get negated as well. Very, very important to know. Another thing to know is if any of the baby Cyber Dragons are on the field get flipped face down, they are not considered Cyber Dragons anymore, since they need to be face up on the field in order to be named Cyber Dragon. Another thing to know is that if any of these are in the spell and trap zone, they are also not called Cyber Dragon. Also a reminder, these cards, when they're in the deck, they are not Cyber Dragon. One of the main interactions you'll find with that is when Cyber Dragon Herz is sent to the graveyard, you can add a Cyber Dragon from your deck or graveyard to your hand. However, if you want to search the deck, you can only pick Cyber Dragon from the deck because that is the only target. However, cards like Cyber Emergency say Cyber Dragon Monster. It could be anything as long as it has Cyber Dragon in the title. So all these would be valid targets for Cyber Emergency. We're going to start off with the monsters, move on to extra deck, and then go to the spell and traps. There should be also timestamps in the description. Obviously, the first card we're going to talk about is Cyber Dragon. It's got 5 stars, so you do need a tribute if you want to normal summon it. If there are no monsters on your opponent's side of the field, and there are no monsters on your side of the field, you can special summon this card from your hand. Key thing about this card is this does not start a chain. This also is not an activated effect, so your opponent can't necessarily respond to it with certain things. There's nothing that I know of that can actually negate that effect either. This does not activate any effects and does not start a chain. The key things to know. This is currently the only Cyber Dragon monster whose name is specifically Cyber Dragon when in the deck, banished monster zone, and in the spell and trap zone, and I guess face down on the field. The only card. The baby Cyber Dragons typically have to be face up on the field with their effects not negated or in the graveyard. Moving on to the main starter of the deck, we have Cyber Dragon Core. When this is normal summoned, we get to add a Cyber Spell or Trap card from our deck to hand. If our opponent controls a monster and we control no monsters, we can banish this card from our graveyard and special summon 1 Cyber Dragon monster from your deck. You can only use 1 Cyber Dragon Core effect per turn, and only once that turn, this card's name becomes Cyber Dragon while on the field or in the graveyard. Core's effect is incredibly powerful because it's going to allow us to find some puzzle piece or thing that we need to continue our plays or to either disrupt our opponent or really anything. Some options we're going to have are cards like Cyber Emergency, Cyber Repair Plant, Cyberdark Realm, even Cybernetic Horizon, Cyberload Fusion, Cyber Revsystem, and Cybernetic Overflow, and even Cybernetic Revolution. As long as Cyber is in the starting name, you're able to search it off of core. Deciding exactly what to search is going to be kind of dependent on the game. If you're going first, you're almost always going to want to go Cybernetic Overflow. However, maybe you need another Cyber Dragon in your hand, or you want to summon another one, so maybe Cyber Emergency is the card you're going to get, so you can play it and then get another Cyber Dragon. Cyber Repair Plan is kind of the same thing as this card, but it's going to be more specific. You can get things like Galaxy Soldier, Jizukiru. Cyberdark Realm is what you're going to go into for the OTK. When we get to this card, we will discuss that. If you have core in the hand, you're typically not going to go for Horizon, because people mainly play Horizon in the deck to get core to the hand. Cyberload Fusion if you want to go for the fusion play. You can go into Revsystem if you want to special summon another Cyber Dragon for your hand, or if you want to revive one from the graveyard. I'd say about 80% of the time I'm going into either Emergency or Cyberdark Realm. However, for the rare times I do go first, we do go into Overflow, so at least we get some form of disruption. If you normal summon core, you have to activate the effect. It is mandatory, because it's a when effect. And you can only use core's effect once per turn, and only one effect that turn. So really limiting. If you normal summon core and you activate the effect and it gets destroyed or something and gets sent to the graveyard, you cannot banish it because the effect was already activated. However, cards like Solemn Judgment that negate the summon of the card actually mean that this card's effect never got to activate because of the timing. So if you play core, it gets Solemn Judgment and then sent to the graveyard, you can then activate core's effect to search your deck for another card in special summon, as long as the criteria fits where your opponent controls a monster and you don't. As a reminder, if this is in the graveyard and you do banish, you can get any Cyber Dragon monster. So it could be Cyber Dragon, you get Herz, Nachster, you can do Vier, you got Drei or Drei, you got everything. Typically with that, I do go into Herz or Nachster. Again, depends on the situation. Nachster is great though, because if you do have a target in your graveyard and you do special summon that, you can get another card on the field and kind of continue your play that way. This is also a rare scenario where Herz does get special summoned, so you can make it a level 5 to go into some rank 5 plays. Unironically, core is the core of the deck. You need this card, it's amazing, and it helps you get all the puzzle pieces and things you need, and it helps you find your answers in the deck. I'm going to go over this OTK a couple times in this video, but it's so important that you understand. This is your bread and butter, I win the game turn 2 for our opponent doesn't have a disruption. You need Cyber Dragon core, and because you also have Emergency, you basically have 6 Cyber Dragon core in the deck. Maybe even 7, 8, or 9 if you include like Horizon and Claw and stuff like that. All you need in your hand is core and something to discard, so it's like it's a 1.5 card combo. And again, core could either be core or Emergency or just some way, just get core into the hand and we're all set. So you normal summon core, you activate core's effect. Core's effect lets us add a cyber spell or trap to our hand. We're going to go Cyber Emergency. We are then going to play Cyber Emergency and activate Cyber Emergency's effect. That allows us to search for a Cyberdark card. We're going to pick Cyberdark Chimera. We're going to activate Cyberdark Realm's effect to get an additional normal summon. That will be Cyberdark Chimera. We will then activate Cyberdark Chimera's effect to discard a spell or trap to the graveyard, and we get to add a power bond to the hand. For general awareness, and in case you want to play against the strategy, if you negate Chimera's effect to search, that is an incredibly powerful time, and it really hurts us or whoever's piloting this deck. Because when we activate the effect, we have to discard, so we're already losing a resource that we don't really have that many of. Typically, when we have this board as well, we're in a very fragile state because we really only play one Cyberdark Realm, we really only play one Chimera. So when the board state is like this, we're just very fragile, and if you're able to destroy one of these pieces, we almost can't get it back. But yeah, this board state is typically where things get really spooky. But anyway, continuing the combo, now that we activate this effect and we successfully got power bond to the hand, we can now fusion summon using Cyber Dragon monsters or cards from our graveyard. So here what we're going to do is we're going to link away this and go into Cyber Dragon Seeger. From here we're going to play power bond, we're going to banish Cyber Dragon core from the graveyard and send this to the graveyard to special summon our Chimeratech Rampage Dragon. From there, we're going to get 2 pops. We can even pop our own Cyberdark Realm just because we don't need it anymore. Then we're going to activate the effect to send, let's say, Cyber Dragon Herz and let's say Nachster to the graveyard, so we get 3 attacks. Herz's effect will trigger and we get to get something back from the graveyard or Cyber Dragon to our deck to hand, but typically here we'll grab our Nachster or we'll have another core in the graveyard and we'll just add it to our hand. And right here is 4200 attack times 3, so a lot of damage. That is your bread and butter 1 card OTK, so definitely know it, understand it, live it. Next up I want to talk about Cyber Dragon Herz. This card's name becomes Cyber Dragon while in the field or in the graveyard. You can only use one of the following effects of Cyber Dragon Herz once per turn and only once that turn. If this card is special summoned, you can make this card's level 5 until the end of turn. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except machine. Or if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one other Cyber Dragon from your deck or graveyard to your hand. As a reminder, you can only use one of these effects only once that turn. Kind of similar to Cyber Dragon Core. So if this card gets special summoned, let's say off the effects of Cyber Dragon Core, and then you decide to make it level 5 and then it gets destroyed, it will not trigger the secondary effect in the graveyard. Some of the main ways you can special summon this card in this deck include Cyber Dragon Nova. We also discussed Cyber Dragon Core's effect that can special summon it. We can also special summon it from the hand or graveyard with Revsystem. So definitely are some ways of special summoning it. Very, very important effect. If this card is sent to the graveyard, let's say you have multiple Cyber Dragons in the graveyard. This card says if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one other Cyber Dragon from your deck or graveyard to your hand. It does not target. That is incredibly important because when you're actually playing the game, a lot of people have disruptions like DD Crow, let's say, or any of the bestial monsters. So if you have multiple copies in the graveyard, let's say, and this gets sent to the graveyard, and let's say you decide you want to pick Cyber Dragon Core, add that to the hand, your opponent does not have the window to, I guess, banish this card from the graveyard or anything like that. If your opponent wants to remove a Cyber Dragon from the graveyard, they have to do it on the activation of this effect when it's sent to the graveyard, not when you decide which card to choose or add to your hand, because they do not have the window to do so. Incredibly important. Herz does not target. One of the best combos and rulings you should know too are Galaxy Soldier and Herz. These are the cards you want to see when you want to go into your rank 5 play because it's just so easy to do so. When you want to play Galaxy Soldier, you send a light monster from your hand to your graveyard, then you get to special summon this card. When Galaxy Soldier is special summoned, you can grab another Galaxy Soldier from your deck and add it to your hand. And when Herz is sent to the graveyard, you can add a Cyber Dragon from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Both of these effects trigger at the same exact time, and you can decide which one resolves first. One of the main reasons this is important is because Ash is so relevant. Ash Blossom is a when effect, so whatever is last in the chain is the only thing Ash can actually negate. So if I went Chain Link 1 Galaxy Soldier, Chain Link 2 Herz, and our opponent Ashes, they only negate Herz. If we go Chain Link 1 Herz, Chain Link 2 Galaxy Soldier, they can only negate Galaxy Soldier. That's important because if there's a card that you need to resolve more than the other, you want to make that happen first in the chain, just in case your opponent has Ash or just some other ability like that or effect. Going back to this play line, so Galaxy Soldier would add Galaxy Soldier from deck to hand, and Cyber Dragon Herz, let's just say there was another Cyber Dragon Vier in the graveyard and we're going to get that back to the hand. You can do the same thing. This is not once per turn. You activate Galaxy Soldier's effect, special summon it. This gets sent to the graveyard. Then from here, you can very easily just overlay this, go into your Nova or any other rank 5 play. Now we can activate Nova's effect to detach a card and then special summon a Cyber Dragon monster or Cyber Dragon card. Nova does specifically say it has to be a Cyber Dragon, just to clarify. Then from here, we can just go right into Infinity. So that is a very, very easy way to get Infinity onto the field. And obviously, if you have more cards, you can continue the play line, but really, really spicy. I do not have the card yet, but Therion King Regulus pairs incredibly well with Herz. Pretending this is King Regulus, it's really good if we have a Herz in the graveyard already. You can special summon King Regulus by targeting a machine card in your graveyard, so Herz would be the perfect target. You have to equip it to there. This is great because it's essentially a free negate King Regulus because our deck's almost all machine. So when you do negate something and they both get sent to the graveyard, Herz's effect will trigger again. You could also trigger on your opponent's turn too. Let's talk about Cyber Dragon Nachster. This card's name becomes Cyber Dragon while on the field or in the graveyard. You can discard one other monster, special summon this card from your hand. If this card is normal summon or special summon, you can target one machine monster with 2100 attack or defense in your graveyard, special summon it. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the rest of the turn, except machine monsters. You can only use the effects of this card once per turn. This card also works pretty good with Cyber Dragon Herz because when we send it to the graveyard again, we get Herz's effect. If you special summon Nachster using its secondary effect, it will lock you into machines even if the effect is negated or the selected target is removed from the graveyard. Important to know. Also, the effect of special summon does target, so your opponent does have an opportunity to respond. Nachster is quite versatile, so there's a lot of things you can do, but one of the really good things you can do is discard Herz. Then you get the special summon Nachster. Herz's effect will trigger, so we'll just get like Cyber Dragon from the deck to hand. Now when this is special summoned, we can target a monster with 2100 more attack. Nova or Infinity is a great option here. Typically Nova because you do run 2 Infinity into the extra deck, but anyway, you target one of those cards, you get to special summon it. We are locked into machines, but at the same time, that doesn't really affect us too much. Nachster is a great card later in the game to have in your hand because typically you're going to have a lot of monsters in the graveyard with 2100 more attack. I guess 2100 attack or defense. Going over some of the options, obviously we have Cyber Dragon, you have Cyber Dragon Infinity, you have Nova. Incredibly important, you have Rampage. That is one of the main ways you're going to be able to get Rampage back from the graveyard. You got Cyber Twin Dragon and you got Seeger. I don't think I'm missing any cards here, but these are the main lineups. Typically Rampage or Nova are going to be your main targets later in the game. One thing I do want to mention is later in the game, typically, let's say you have an Infinity and Nova in the graveyard, you're usually going to have them both just because that's how it plays out. When you do normal summon or special summon Nachster and you have Nova and Infinity in the graveyard, you typically want to go into Nova because you do run 2 Infinity into the extra deck, and just having Nova on the field will allow you to just do that. You get to just get a free Infinity. Then you could even activate Infinity's effect to suck up that up, so you get 2 material immediately. It's handy to know because if you were to just activate Nachster's effect to just get Infinity, it just has no material. I mean, you can activate the effect to suck it up, but you don't have additional material and you have to use Nachster. It just gives you some more material to use. It's kind of just a better play line, I guess, in my opinion, but people might disagree. Next up, we're going to talk about Vier or Cyber Dragon Vier. This card's name becomes Cyber Dragon while on the field or in the graveyard. If you normal special summon a Cyber Dragon, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand in defense position. You can only use the effect of Cyber Dragon Vier once per turn. Every Cyber Dragon you control gains 500 attack and 500 defense. One of the important things with Vier is that it turns off machine duplication, so if you do run both of these cards in your deck, just be aware of this. Select one machine type monster with 500 less attack on your side of the field. Core has 400 attack and Herz has 100 attack, so if we do end up having Vier on the field, they will be over the allowable requirements for machine duplication, so you cannot actually activate this. So definitely keep that in mind if you do play both. Vier is a really nice card because we have so many Cyber Dragons in the deck. So if you do anything, you summon any Cyber Dragon, you just get this card out for free. And it also boosts all of our Cyber Dragons anyway. One of the really important things with this card, although this doesn't work in Master Duel and it doesn't work in the OCG, but for some reason just the TCG it works, you can actually chain block using this card. So the most important thing would be if you normal summon Cyber Dragon Core, technically in the TCG world you special summon this before Core's effect actually gets to activate or before it resolves. You still hold priority, I guess is a better way to explain it. When Core is normal summoned, then the effect activates. However, this card reads if a card is normal special summoned. So this card gets normal summoned, and although it kind of depends what format or who you're playing, but when this gets special summoned in the TCG world, this technically gets special summoned at the same time or at moments before this. So the effect actually activates after Vier is already on the field. So the most important thing is if someone tries to Ash Blossom when you have this, they can't, again, because Ash is a when effect. So the last thing that happened in the chain is technically this Chainlink 1 Core, Chainlink 2 Vier. So Ash wouldn't technically have a valid target. Again, it kind of gets a little dicey here, but it does chain block and it does chain block some other things. But just be careful kind of what format you're playing because I don't think it works in Master Duel. Next up, let's go for Cyber Dragon Drei, Cyber Dragon Drei. When this card is normal summoned, you can make all Cyber Dragons you currently control become level 5. You cannot special summon any monsters during the turn you activate this effect except machine type monsters. If this card is banished, you can target one Cyber Dragon you control. It cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects this turn. This card's name becomes Cyber Dragon while on the field or in the graveyard. This card does sound better than what it actually is because it has to be normal summon to get that effect, and you typically don't want to use your normal summon on something like this. You typically want it to be core. Also, this can't banish itself, so really the only ways you're really going to banish it is if it's already in the graveyard and you play Cyberload Fusion, or if you play Cybernetic Overflow, then you could banish it, but it's sad it can't banish itself. That'd be a lot better. If you do activate its effect where everything becomes level 5, it is an entire turn restriction, so you cannot special summon any monsters that are not machined before or after you activate this effect. Also, this card's banish effect cannot target cards such as Rampage, Cyber End, or Cyber Twin, since it specifically says it must be a Cyber Dragon. You can target one Cyber Dragon you control. It cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects this turn, so it even makes it more limiting. But making everything level 5 can be quite handy, especially if you are running mostly an Xyz package, because everything becomes level 5. Next up, I want to talk about Cyberdark Chimera. You can discard one spell or trap, add one power bond from your deck to your hand. You can only use dragon or machine cyber monsters as fusion material this turn. Also, when you fusion summon this card, you can also banish monsters from your graveyard as material. If this card is sent to your graveyard, you can send one Cyberdark monster from your deck to the graveyard with a different name from the cards in your graveyard. You can only use each effect of Cyberdark Chimera once per turn. If you want to OTK using the Power Bond build, you need to have at least one of these in the deck, and typically that's what you're going to do. This card plus one Cyberdark Realm gives you OTK potential. This also does have 2100 attack, so you can revive it from the graveyard off of Nachster. This card does bring up a lot of different rulings that you have to know. One of the main things is if you activate this effect to get the power bond to your hand, it's an entire turn restriction on fusion summoning dragon and machines. The entire turn, so just keep that in mind. Also, you can only banish the dragon or machine type monsters from your graveyard the turn you activate Chimera's effect. So make sure when you activate this effect, you actually mean it. One thing to keep in mind too, when you do activate Chimera's effect, you will not be able to special summon things like Megafleet and Fortress Dragon, because again, Chimera's effect specifically locks you into using any other fusion material other than dragon and machine. And if you do contact fuse away your opponent and then you go to activate this, again, you cannot, because the whole turn restriction. That's something that messed me up several times. One thing to keep in mind too is I always run 2 power bond, because if you have this card in your hand and you activate this effect, you don't get the benefits of banishing things from your graveyard. Chimera has to successfully get a power bond from the deck to the hand so you can actually banish that turn. Power bond cannot be in your hand, or it can be, but you need to be able to actually search it from the deck to the hand to get the benefits of the effect. I'm almost positive you can activate Chimera's effect if there is no valid search. However, you're just voluntarily discarding a card and limiting yourself to what you can use as fusion material that turn, so there isn't really a benefit to that. That is why I typically run 2 power bond. The secondary effect doesn't really come up too often. However, if you are running Claw and Cannon and other Cyberdark cards, you can send one of those cards to the graveyard when this card does go to the graveyard. This card gets a little tricky with some of the rulings, but because of it adds power bond to the hand and you can just make a big monster, I love it in the deck. Really quickly going over the OTK again, you need at least Cyber Dragon Core in the hand or a way to get it into the hand, and some other spell and trap to discard. You play Core, activate Core's effect to search for Cyberdark Realm. You play Cyberdark Realm, searching for Cyberdark Chimera. Activate Realm's effect to normal summon Chimera from the hand. Activate Chimera's effect to send a spell or trap from the hand to the graveyard to add the power bond to your hand. Next, you're going to link these away, and you're going to link summon into Seeger. Next, we're going to play power bond. We're going to banish Cyber Dragon Core, and we're going to send Cyber Dragon Seeger to the graveyard to summon Cybernetic Rampage Dragon. We can then pop 2 spell or traps on the field. Then we're going to activate the effect to send 2 light machines from our deck to the graveyard. So we'll do Herz and Nachster. Herz's effect will trigger, so we'll grab Nachster or any other Cyber Dragon back from our graveyard to our deck, to our hand. And then we attack 3 times with 4200 attack. Next up, we're going to talk about Cyberdark Claw. If this card is sent to the graveyard while equipped to a monster, you can target 1 Cyberdark monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. You can only use each of the following effects of Cyberdark Claw once per turn. You can discard this card, add 1 Cyberdark spell or trap from your deck to your hand. During damage calculations, if a monster equipped with this card battles, you can send 1 monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. In a normal Cyber Dragon build, not the whole Cyberdark variant, the only thing this card really does is we want to add a Cyberdark spell or trap to our hand. The only 2 targets for this are going to be Realm and Cybernetic Horizon, and typically, again, if you are playing this package, Cyberdark Claw is just more copies of Cybernetic Horizon without it being as bricky in a sense. What Cybernetic Horizon and Cyberdark Claw do in a deck like this is it gives us access to another way we can get the Core. Since Core is such a big starter for the deck, these in a sense act as starters. Cybernetic Horizon does require a little bit to actually summon though. You need to send something from your hand to the graveyard and something from the deck to the graveyard. Also something from the extra deck to the graveyard. The only thing that might be tricky is sending an extra card from the hand to the graveyard, because sometimes you might not have that additional, resource. But adding these 2 cards to the deck does give us the option to essentially kind of play more starters. Cybernetic Horizon also gives us the ability to easily send Cyber Dragon Eternity to the graveyard, which can help protect some of our monsters. Claw and Horizon definitely work better in a Cyber Dark build, however, they do potentially have some impact in, a standard build. Let's talk about Cyber Eltanin. This card cannot be normal summoned or set. This card cannot be special summoned except by removing from play all light machine type monsters you control and that are in your graveyard. This card's attack and defense become equal to the number of monsters removed that way. When it was special summoned, times 500. When this card is special summoned, send all other face-up monsters to the field, or on the field to the graveyard. What is good about this card is it cannot be normal summoned and set. So what does that mean? We can actually search it using Cyber Emergency. You can obviously still search this off of Repair Plant, but the thing is, being able to find it using Emergency just gives this a very searchable kind of board wipe that doesn't target. In a lot of situations in board states, that is pretty powerful. There are some downsides obviously to this card, like if you already have a board, you don't want to remove all your creatures. And if you have some cards in your graveyard, sometimes you don't really want to remove them all. However, having a searchable board wipe is really nice. Next up, let's talk about Jizukiru. This is just a Kaiju, and those who don't know what Kaijus are, it's just you can remove one creature from your opponent's board. It doesn't target, it doesn't do anything. You just get to remove, tribute summon using one of their monsters, and this card gets put on the field. We obviously play the machine because we can easily contact fuse away using Chimeratech Dragon. So removing this card is not really a problem at all. You can also search this card off of Cyber Repair Plan. It cannot be searched using Cyber Emergency. This is a really good main deck answer to a lot of threats that exist. Next up is Galaxy Soldier. You can send one other light monster from your hand to the graveyard, special summon this card from your hand in defense position. When this card is special summoned, you can add one Galaxy monster from your deck to hand. You can only use this effect of Galaxy Soldier once per turn. Even though this card isn't technically a Cyber Dragon, it's a staple in almost every Cyber Dragon deck because it's a light machine that is also level 5. So we can search it off of Repair Plant. We can more easily go into our rank 5 plays. This card paired with Cyber Dragon Herz is a great combo. If you can get these two cards in your hand, either you start with it or you can search it, again with Repair Plant or Cyber Emergency, or all of our searchers, you can easily get a rank 5. What you do is you send this card to the graveyard, Herz to the graveyard, to special summon Galaxy Soldier. Both these effects trigger at the same time. Galaxy Soldier is going to get a Galaxy Soldier from the deck, and Cyber Dragon Herz is going to get a Cyber Dragon from the graveyard or deck. So we'll grab this, get these two cards to our hand. We will do the same thing. We will send this to the graveyard to special summon this in defense mode because it is not once per turn. The effect to search is once per turn, but the effect to summon is not. We will then overlay those and we will go into Nova, and from here we can detach Galaxy Soldier, and we can special summon something else. Or specifically it has to be a Cyber Dragon from the graveyard. Then from here we could just overlay onto Infinity, so we have a negate, we can suck up an opponent's monster or even one of our own, and we can obviously keep going with the play because we do have another Cyber Dragon. Really nice combo. You can go into any rank 5 really easily. As a reminder, the discard is part of the cost, so even if you do get negated or the effect is negated, you still need to discard. The last monster we'll talk about is Therion King Regulus. You can only use each of the following effects of Therion King Regulus once per turn. You can target one Therion monster or one machine monster in your graveyard, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, equip that monster to this card. When your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you can send one Therion monster card from your hand or face up on the field to the graveyard, negate that effect. A Therion monster equipped with this card gains 700 attack. Also, you can activate the second effect listed above as if it were Therion King Regulus. This card works incredibly well in the deck because we have a lot of machines in the graveyard, so we can easily special summon this card for free. If we have a Herz in the graveyard and we special summon Therion King Regulus with the Herz, when we do negate either our turn or our opponent's turn, Herz goes to the graveyard so we can get an additional Cyber Dragon back from our graveyard or deck to our hand. So that pairs very well. In this deck, it's essentially a free special summon with the negate, so that card is incredibly helpful. I do not have a copy yet, I just don't feel like spending the money, but when it goes down in price, I'll pick up 1 or 2 copies. It also pairs well with Clockwork Night. We can banish Clockwork Night from our graveyard, then discard a card and add one Earth Machine monster from our deck and add it to our hand. Therion King Regulus is an Earth Machine, so that would be our target. So we also do have other ways of getting to our hand if need. We're going to move on to some extra deck monsters. Let's go over the probably most difficult and complex ones, Megafleet and Chimeratech Dragon. So let's start off with Fortress Dragon. They both have quite similar effects or text on them, so they have very similar rulings. There's just some things a little different, but we're going to lump them in the same category for the purpose of this video. Fortress Dragon, this requires one Cyber Dragon and one or more machine type monsters. Cannot be used as fusion material, must be first special summoned from your extra deck by sending the above cards from either field to the graveyard. You do not use polymerization. The original attack of this card becomes 1,000 times the number of fusion materials used for its fusion summon. Chimeratech Megafleet requires one Cyber Dragon monster and 1+ monsters in the extra monster zone. Cannot be used as fusion material, must be first special summoned from your extra deck by sending the above cards from either field to the graveyard. You don't use polymerization. Original attack becomes 1,200 times the number of fusion materials used for its special summon. These cards are quite confusing because it's technically not a fusion summon, but it is a fusion monster. So a lot of kind of rulings and interactions, they all kind of vary based on the card that's interacting with it. If I understand correctly, these are inherent special summons. These summons also do not start chains. And since we're tributing our opponent's monsters typically, if our opponent wants to interact with it, they have to do it before we decide to special summon these or after their monsters are tributed away. We can also only use our opponent's monsters if the requirements are met, because it says either field. That will require one of our opponents to have Cyber Dragon monster or Cyber Dragon, but it is possible. The extra monster zone is specifically the 2 monster zone up top They are not in these original zones down here. Even if a link monster is in these zones, you cannot use it as fusion material or for Megafleet summon. If a pendulum monster is in the extra monster zone, you cannot use it as material because Megafleet specifically requires the card to go from the field to the graveyard. Pendulum monsters go to the extra deck, so definitely keep that in mind. Also, a good point too is if someone has, like, let's say Macrocosmos or some card where cards do not go from the field to the graveyard, they go right to the banish zone, you cannot summon these cards because it requires the monsters to be sent from the field to the graveyard, and it's specifically said on the card. You cannot use tokens to fusion summon since those cards do not go to the graveyard. A lot of little graveyard things you just got to be aware of. If either of these cards are negated by something like infinite impermanence, their attack becomes 0 and they stay 0. As a reminder, both of these cards cannot be used to fusion summon anything because it says it on the card, cannot be used as fusion material, and this monster cannot be used as fusion material monster. If you activate Cyberdark Chimera's effect to add power bond to the hand and all that jazz, you will not be able to summon these two cards, and you could not have summoned these the same turn you activate this effect because this is a whole turn restriction. Again, Chimera's effect specifically says that you can only use dragon or machine cyber monsters as fusion material. You can still summon these cards, but you have to use cyber dragon or machine cards, which typically you're not going to be using when you want to go into these because you want to suck up your opponent's monster. So just keep that in mind. It's a whole turn restriction if you activate Chimera, Cyberdark Chimera specifically. You can use face down Cyber Dragon monsters for the Megafleet summon. However, you do have to show your opponent, at least as you're doing it, that you do have the correct material, but you can use face down Cyber Dragon monsters. For the case of Fortress Dragon, your baby Cyber Dragons must be face up because it specifically calls out Cyber Dragon, not Cyber Dragon monster like Megafleet. When Cyber Dragon core is face down, it is a Cyber Dragon core. When it is face up and not negated, it is a Cyber Dragon. Let's talk about a pretty confusing rule that has to deal with summoning Fortress and Megafleet with equipped monsters. Let's assume Cyber Dragon Herz is equipped to Cyberdark Horn, and we have just some monster in the extra monster zone. Even though all the baby Cyber Dragons, their card says that when it's on the field it is considered a Cyber Dragon, when it's in the spell and trap zone, things just get a little weird, honestly. I don't understand this completely, but I just know it's how it works. If there are baby Cyber Dragons in the back row, they're technically considered not monsters. They're more just like, this is Cyber Dragon Herz that just so happens to be in the spell and trap zone, so it's kind of like a continuous spell and trap, but it is not Cyber Dragon. So you cannot go into Megafleet and you cannot go into Fortress Dragon. It no work. Do not work. However, if you have Cyber Dragon specifically in the spell and trap zone and it is equipped to a monster, you will be able to summon Fortress Dragon but not Megafleet. And I guess the best way I can try explaining this is Chimeratech Fortress specifically says you need a Cyber Dragon and one or more machine type monsters. You can only special summon this card from your extra deck by sending the above cards from either side of the field to the graveyard. So right now we technically have Cyber Dragon on the field because even if this is in the spell and trap zone, its name is still Cyber Dragon. So if you wanted to play Fortress, you can use both of these monsters and it will be completely legal. However, let's say we have this and we want to go into Megafleet because, you know, we got an extra monster in the monster zone. We cannot do that because Megafleet says we need a Cyber Dragon monster and one or blah, 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 blah. Same effect, send the cards from the field to the graveyard. So because it says Cyber Dragon monster, this is a Cyber Dragon, yes. But is it a monster? Technically no, because it's in the spell and trap zone. I mean, yes, it's a monster, but it's not in the monster zone, so it's treated more as a spell and trap. If the ruling is confusing, I completely understand because it is very confusing. But just know, baby Cyber Dragon's back here, you can't use. However, if you got Cyber Dragon, you can go into Fortress, but that's it. Only Fortress. Hopefully that kind of clears that up. Don't think about it too much if it's confusing, just understand the basics and you'll be good. Typically this doesn't come up that often, but when it does, you gotta know your rulings. With the new addition of Clockwork Night, this makes Fortress Dragon just so good because all face-up monsters in the field become machine. So if you play Clockwork Night, as long as you can get a Cyber Dragon out on the field, you can get into Fortress Dragon incredibly easily. You could wipe away all of your opponent's monsters. So with the recent addition of Clockwork Knight, man, Fortress Dragon is so good. Next up, we're going to go into Chimeratech Overdragon. You need 1 Cyber Dragon plus 1+ machine monsters. It must be fusion summoned. If this card is fusion summoned, send all cards you control to the graveyard. The attack and defense of this card become equal to the number of fusion materials used for its fusion summon times 800. This card can attack your opponent's monsters a number of times each battle phase up to the number of fusion materials used for its fusion summon. As a reminder though, it can only attack monsters up to the number of times it was fusion materials used to fusion summon. The amount of times that's messing me up is crazy. With the new Evolution Endburst card, it actually makes it so you can attack your opponent that many times. However, that's definitely not an amazing strategy. It bricks a lot, but it is a lot of fun. Also, when you do summon this card, don't forget it removes all of your other cards you control to the graveyard. That is so bad, but the card is so cool. Let's go over one of the classics. Not too much to chat about here, but Cyberdark Dragon. You need 3 Cyber Dragons, and a fusion summon of this card can only be conducted with the above fusion material monsters. During battle between this card and a defense position monster whose defense is lower than the attack of this card, inflict the difference as battle damage to your opponent. Definitely not the strongest Cyber Dragon monster, but it's so nostalgic and so beautiful. If you can add it to your deck, great, but typically if you're playing super competitively, you might not want to do this. Next up, let's talk about Cyber Twin. 2 Cyber Dragons. A fusion summon of this card can only be conducted with the above fusion materials. This card can attack twice during the same battle phase. Rampage is a little bit better of a card than this. However, the reason why you play this, especially in the new Duality build, there's even more reasons, but it has 2800 attack, which can hit over a lot of other things as compared to Rampage that has 2100. That little bit of a difference is quite big, and the fact that you also have to activate Rampage's effect in order to get the additional attacks makes it prone to some other cards. Cyber Twin never activates an effect to get that ability, and it doesn't start a chain. This effect is considered a continuous effect. However, if Cyber Twin is somehow negated by something, let's say in perm, then yes, it will negate the effect still, so you can only attack once. Also, when you do power bond it, if you do go that route, it will be 5600 attack, which is over 10,000 damage, so really nice. It also has 2100 defense, so you can revive it off of Nachster. Next up, let's talk about Cyber Eternity Dragon. You need a Cyber Dragon and 2 machine monsters. If you have a machine fusion monster in your graveyard, your opponent cannot target this card with card effects. Also, it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card's effects. If this fusion summon card you control is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card, you can special summon 1 Cyber Dragon from your hand or deck or graveyard. You can banish this card from your graveyard this turn. Your opponent cannot target fusion monsters you control with card effects. Also, they cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. This card is actually pretty good. I think it works a lot better in the Cyber Dark variants, but I think there's still a place in a normal build for it. It does have 4000 defense, so it is a big blocker potentially. Also, if you do have a fusion machine in the graveyard, again, your opponent cannot target it with card effects, and it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So they have to beat over this somehow. This card does pair very well with Cybernetic Horizon because this is typically the card you're going to send to the graveyard. When that card is sent to the graveyard, you can also banish it at any time, although it's not a quick effect, but you can banish it whenever you have priority, and it's your turn obviously. And for the entire rest of the turn, it'll make it so your opponent cannot target fusion monsters you control with card effects, and they also can't be destroyed. So it definitely helps out with OTKs, but it does require a little bit of setup. There also is some situations where this card does come in handy a lot to fusion summon because its requirements are a lot less strict. You just need a Cyber Dragon and 2 machine types. Typically, if you have some other types of machine monsters in your deck that don't necessarily are Cyber Dragon specific, this card is quite easy to summon. With Power Bond, it gets the 5600 attack, and again, 4000 defense. It's a big boy. I really wish the effect to banish was a quick effect because it would be a lot better. However, the effect is still good, but that means your opponent can respond before you can actually get the card's effect off. Next up is Chimeratech Rampage Dragon. This is definitely one of the best fusion summons you get in the deck. It's incredibly easy to get out, it packs a punch, and it removes back row just for no reason. You just need 2 or more Cyber Dragon monsters. Again, very easy to summon. You don't even need Cyber Dragon. A fusion summon of this card can only be conducted with the above fusion materials. When this card is fusion summoned, you can target spell or trap cards in the field up to the number of fusion materials used for its fusion summon. Destroy them. Once per turn, you can send 2 light machine type monsters from your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, for each monster sent to the graveyard, this card gains 1 additional attack during the battle phase. This thing is an OTK machine. One of the big things with this card you need to understand is the effect to destroy spell and traps can miss timing. One of the cards that is notorious for that is Cyberload Fusion. If you Cyberload Fusion into Rampage Dragon, the chain resolves with Cyberload Fusion ending last, and because Rampage's ability to pop spell and traps on the field is a when ability, it misses the timing. In order to destroy the spell and traps on the field, Chimeratech Rampage has to be the last thing in the chain for that effect to resolve. Cards like Power Bond and Overload Fusion still allow you to use Rampage's effect to pop things because it's not a quick effect, and just how the chain resolves again. So just keep that in mind. There are cards, again, Duality is going to be another one. Because it's a quick effect or a quick play spell, it will make you miss the timing. You can activate the ability to send stuff to the graveyard from your deck. Even turn 1, you don't need to conduct your battle phase in order to activate that effect, or you don't even need to attack to activate that effect. You can activate that effect at your leisure without needing to commit to anything. If you target a spell or trap card on the field and for some reason, let's say that trap card becomes a monster, a big example is the Eldritch cards. That trap monster is still destroyed because it's the same card. Again, it might be a little specific to exactly what the card is, but if that spell or trap card is the same spell or trap card that then becomes the monster, it is still destroyed because it's the same target. A lot of times when you do summon a Rampage and you activate the effect, you're typically going to want to send Herz and just some other Cyber Dragon to the graveyard, typically one that you want to your hand. Typically Core is a great one, so when Herz and Core get sent to the graveyard, Herz's effect will trigger and you will be able to add Core back to your hand. So really nice. You can also do that with Nachster too. Another great board state is to have Rampage with Seeger out in the field. Seeger can buff Rampage to give it 4200 attack, and you can still attack that many times, and you can deal damage to your opponent. Because when you activate Seeger's effect, that's the only card that's gonna not be able to deal damage to your opponent. But when you activate on Rampage or any other monster, that card will still be able to deal damage. Great thing to do is if you somehow get Power Bond onto this card, it's 4200 attack. And then if you got Seeger out in the field and you buff it, you get 6300 attack times 3. It's super spicy, a lot of damage. Typically Rampage will be the card you're gonna go into to win the game most of the time. It deals a lot of damage, and you could pop some back row, which is pretty important too. You know, Mirror Force, I mean, it's not really played that much anymore, but it's still a thing, it exists. And if you were to go into something like Twin, sure, the damage will be there, but at the same time, you can't remove that back row. But then again, you also have to activate this effect, and the effect has to resolve in order for you to get the additional attacks. So there's some things to consider there. It also has 2100 attack, so you can revive it easily off of Nachster. The big thing though to remember, it can miss timing with cards like Duality and Cyberload Fusion, but with your normal Power Bond, Overload Fusion, and some other ways of summoning this, yeah, you don't need to worry about it. But if you summon it using a quick play spell, it will miss the timing. Next up on the list, we're going to talk about Cyber Dragon Seeger. You need 2 machine monsters, including at least 1 Cyber Dragon. This card's name becomes Cyber Dragon while in the field or in the graveyard. During the battle phase, if this card did not declare an attack, quick effect, you can target 1 machine monster you control with 2100 or more attack. That monster gains 2100 attack and defense. Also, neither player takes battle damage from battles involving this card. These changes last until the end of this turn. You can only use this effect of Cyber Dragon Seeger once per turn. The key thing to note here is that when it says neither player takes battle damage from this card, it means Cyber Dragon Seeger, not the card it targets. So you can target any other monster with 2100 more attack that is also machine. So if you target a machine monster with 2100 more attack, that monster can still deal damage to your opponent. But if you buff Cyber Dragon Seeger, it'll get the buff, but no one will take damage. Also, if you were to buff some other monster and then attack with Cyber Dragon Seeger, again, no damage will get dealt with this card. It can still destroy monsters and everything, but no damage can be dealt. You must activate that effect before Cyber Dragon Seeger attacks. That is pretty critical as well. Once it attacks, you will no longer be able to do it. You do need Cyber Dragon Seeger to go into the OTK with Core, Chimera, Power Bond, and all that. It's also just a really good card to have. It's so easy to summon in this deck. You can also protect your monsters on your opponent's turn because, again, it is a quick effect. A lot of people don't read this card, and especially online, people just attack right into it. They see it's low health or low attack, and then they just get smoked because the attack is doubled out of nowhere it's a quick effect. It is kind of funny. Since it does have 2100 attack, we can special summon it from the graveyard with Nachster. There's not too much else to talk about with Seeger. You definitely need at least 1 in the deck. Just make sure you understand if you activate this effect and you target another monster, that monster can still deal damage. Just players won't take battle damage involving Seeger. Everything else is just normal. Let's head on over to the Xyz monster, Cyber Dragon Nova. You need 2 level 5 machine monsters. Once per turn, you can detach one XYZ material from this card and target one Cyber Dragon in your graveyard. Special summon that target. Once per turn, during either player's turn, you can banish one Cyber Dragon from your hand or face up from your monster zone. This card gains 2100 attack until the end of this turn. If this card is in your possession, is sent to your graveyard by your opponent's card effect, you can special summon one machine type fusion monster from your extra deck. First important thing to know about this card is you need a Cyber Dragon already in the graveyard in order to activate its effect. So let's pretend we have a Galaxy Soldier and a Cyber Dragon on Nova, and we have nothing in the graveyard. We cannot detach Cyber Dragon to special summon Cyber Dragon. There already needs to be a Cyber Dragon in the graveyard. Now let's say Herz is in the graveyard. What we can do is detach Cyber Dragon and then special summon the Cyber Dragon. I know it's a little confusing, but that is just how the interaction kind of takes place. A Cyber Dragon already needs to exist in the graveyard to activate the effect, but if you send a Cyber Dragon to the graveyard, you can then special summon that exact one that you sent. Card effects such as Solemn Strike or Solemn Judgment activate Nova's effect that will allow you to special summon from your extra deck. This is because Nova is in your possession. It doesn't need to be on the field, it doesn't need to be anywhere, as long as you own the card and it is sent to the graveyard by your opponent's card effect. You will get to get a free special summon of a fusion monster, typically Cyber N, maybe Cyber Twin. If this card is sent from your extra deck to the graveyard from an opponent's card effect, I think there's one Dogmatica card that does this, that still counts as you being able to special summon Cyber N or another fusion machine monster from your extra deck, because your extra deck is still a part of your possession. Basically, a rule of thumb is if this card gets sent to the graveyard by anything your opponent does, you can activate its effect to special summon something else. One thing to keep in mind is you cannot play certain machine fusions such as Cyber End Dragon. This is because Cyber End Dragon specifically says it must be fusion summoned or special summoned by attributing one level 10 or lower Cyber Dark Fusion monster equipped with Cyber End Dragon. Since Nova's ability is not a fusion summon, and you're obviously not attributing a Cyber Darkness Dragon with the Cyber End Dragon, you obviously can't summon it. Difference with a card like Cyber End is it just says a fusion summon of this card can only be conducted with the above fusion material monsters. It isn't necessarily saying anything that's limiting it from being special summoned from the extra deck. I hope that kind of clears up that a little bit. There are some situations where you do want to just banish a Cyber Dragon from your hand or field in order to get this thing the 4200 attack. I think the likelihood is a little less because typically you just want to detach and go into Infinity, but there always is that option. Moving on to Cyber Dragon Infinity, you need 3 level 6 light machine type monsters, or once per turn you can also XZ summon this card by using Cyber Dragon Nova you control as material. The XYZ materials attached to that monster also become XYZ material of this card. This card gains 200 attack for each XZ material attached to it. Once per turn, you can target one face-up attack position monster on the field attached to this card as a face-up XZ material. Once per turn, during either player's turn, when a card or effect is activated, you can detach one XZ material from this card, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. You can only suck up one monster each turn during your turn only. That is not a quick effect. The negate is obviously a quick effect, so you can do that pretty much whenever. Infinity is basically an omni negate, so it can negate anything as long as something gets activated. If you suck up an opponent's XZ monster, the materials do not get attached to Affinity 2. Only the selected monster that you suck up will get attached, everything else will go to the graveyard. As a reminder, you can only summon Infinity once per turn off of Nova. There are a lot of combos you could kind of set up 2 Infinities, however, again, you cannot. We're only limited to 1. Do not forget about gaining the extra 200 attack, that does come in handy a lot. Also, you cannot suck up tokens even if they're in attack position. This is most notable with the Adventure token or the Sword Soul tokens, or even the Nibiru token. Those are probably some really common ones you might see, or the Jurassic World token, or whatever that dinosaur token is. You can't suck those up. You can also suck up your own monsters, don't forget about that, as long as they're in attack mode. Both Infinity and Nova are quite powerful cards, and they're quite easy to summon in this deck, especially with the Galaxy Soldiers. The last monster we'll talk about is Salamangreat Almiraj. You need one normal monster with 1000 or less attack. Quick effect, you contribute this card, then target one monster you control. It cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects this turn. When a normal summon monster you control is destroyed by battle while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card. You can only use this effect as Salamander once per turn. The main reason why this card is in the deck is to very easily get a Cyber Dragon into the graveyard when we need it. It obviously does have the nice protection to it, but typically we just need it to go to the graveyard. So one of the main ways, or one of the main things you're going to see with this is you're going to have either Herz or Core. You're going to have one of these normal summoned, typically Core. Sometimes off of your first turn, when you play core, you're going to want to grab Power Plant because you're going to need Jizukiru, or you're going to want Galaxy Soldier. So off of core, maybe you'll add Power Plant, but or Repair Plant. But the problem is you can't activate this until a Cyber Dragon is in the graveyard. Well, that's when Salamander comes in. You can just link it off since it is a normal summon monster with 1000 or less attack. And then now Power Plant or Repair Plant is online. One thing you got to keep in mind though is remember if your monsters were special summon or normal summon, because this is only normal summon monsters. Almiraj also works really well with Megafleet. If we have just some Cyber Dragon on the field with Almiraj, we can just link those off and then go into Megafleet, which is pretty cool. And also kind of a spicy thing too is if we have another Cyber Dragon on the field and our opponent has something in the extra monster zone, we can summon another Megafleet, then potentially go into like a rank 10 play. Doesn't happen a lot, but it is a possibility. But getting an additional Megafleet or getting an easy Megafleet is possible with Almiraj. Almost every Cyber Dragon deck needs to have this because when you need the Cyber Dragon in the graveyard or you need a way to link it off, you really, really need it. Maybe some people could live without it, but I think it's just a card that you need in the extra deck right now. Hopefully there becomes like a Cyber Dragon dedicated card that's a link one that replaces this with a similar effect, but we don't have that as of right now. Moving on to some spell and traps, we have probably the most important one, Cyber Emergency. Add one light machine monster that cannot be normal summoned or set, or one Cyber Dragon monster from your deck to your hand. If the activation of this card is in its owner's possession was negated by your opponent's card effect and sent to your graveyard, you can discard one card, add this card to your hand. You can only activate one Cyber Emergency per turn. This is probably the most important spell card in our deck. It gives us access or the ability to find any of our puzzle pieces or any card that we need, like so. There's obviously some other cards too, but these are going to be the main ones that we're going to be kind of targeting the most. Typically, if you don't have core, you're going to be going for core just so you can get an additional cyber spell or trap. Eltanin for the board wipe, Nachster to potentially revive something, Herz if you have the Galaxy Soldier in your hand, you're trying to go for that combo. There's just so many things you can do and grab with the emergency. If our opponent Ash Blossoms to negate the effect, you cannot use the secondary effect to discard to re-add this to your hand. If the opponent negates this with something like Solemn Judgment, then yes, we will be able to discard a card and re-add it back to our hand. But Ash Blossom specifically, it does not. Very sad, very confusing. If emergency gets negated and sent to the graveyard and you do discard a card to add it back to your hand, you can play Cyber Emergency again because the effect was negated, or the activation of the card was negated, so you technically never even activated it. As a reminder, important cards in the deck that you cannot search Galaxy Soldier, and you cannot search Jizukiru. Both of these cards can be normal summoned. You will typically never normal summon them, but they can be. Key thing, can. They're also obviously not Cyber Dragons, and the difference with Eltanin, even though it's not a Cyber Dragon monster, it specifically says this card cannot be normal summoned or set, and is a light machine. So key thing with that. Branching off of that, a very important card also is Cyber Repair Plant. If Cyber Dragon's in our graveyard, we can activate one of these effects. If you have 3 or more Cyber Dragons in your graveyard at activation, you can activate both of these effects and resolve in sequence. You can only activate one of these cards once per turn. We can add one light machine monster from our deck to our hand, or we can target one light machine monster in our graveyard and shuffle that into your deck. Or we could do both if we have 3 or more Cyber Dragons at activation. The key thing is we just need one Cyber Dragon in the graveyard to activate this card. The effect will still resolve even if the Cyber Dragon is removed from the graveyard, and that's because Repair Plant just needs a Cyber Dragon in the graveyard on the activation. It doesn't necessarily matter after that. Key cards you're going to search for this, you can obviously search for anything that Emergency can search for, but the key things, Jizukiru and Galaxy Soldier, are going to be the ones that you're typically going to go for when you activate Repair Plant. All around a pretty basic card, but again, you need to have something in your graveyard at activation, and it doesn't matter if it gets removed because you just need it when you activate it. Next up, let's talk about Cyberdark Realm. When this card is activated, you can add one Cyberdark monster from your deck to your hand with a different name from the cards in your graveyard. During your main phase, you can immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon one Cyberdark monster. You can only use the previous effect of Cyberdark Realm once per turn. If you equip a monster from your graveyard by the effect of a Cyberdark monster that activated when it was normal summon or special summon, you can equip from your opponent's graveyard instead. You can only activate one Cyberdark Realm once per turn. The key thing with this card in a Cyber Dragon deck like this is we just wanted this to get Chimera to the hand, and so we can get an additional normal summon to summon Chimera to get that OTK. That is really the only purpose of this card in this deck. Also, it says immediately after this effect resolves, but you can do it any time after the effect. It doesn't have to be immediately after you activate this. One of the key things with this card is if this gets ashed, the effect to search gets negated, but the effect to normal summon does not. but typically if it gets negated, you're obviously not going to have Chimera in the hand, but just maybe there's some situations like that. But yeah, we just need that card to get Chimera to the hand to get Power Bond. Next up, we'll talk about Cybernetic Horizon. This card is treated as a Cyber Dark card. We need to send 2 dragon or machine cyber monsters with different attributes to the graveyard, one from your hand and the other from the deck. Then we can add 1 dragon or machine cyber monster from your deck to your hand. And if we do, we send 1 machine cyber fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. You can activate 1 Cybernetic Horizon per turn. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck you turn. You activate this card except machine monsters. So this card is a mouthful. It's a lot in one card. This card is really good in Cyber Darks, but it's okay in this deck. The main thing we want to do in this deck is it's another way to get core to the hand, so it kind of acts as a starter. This is searchable off of Cyberdark Claw because it is treated as a Cyber Dark card. What you have in your hand is going to be dependent on what you send to the graveyard. Typically, you really want to have Herz, because when you activate this card, Herz is going to go to the graveyard, so at least you'll get something back to your hand. But if you send Herz to the graveyard, then you need to send either Cyberdark Claw or Cyberdark Chimera. One thing to keep in mind is the cost to activate this card is sending something from deck to graveyard and hand to graveyard, which is pretty good because sometimes in the Cyberdark, or in Cyberdark specifically, you want that. You need to fill your graveyard up. But in this, it's kind of bad because our graveyard is used as a resource, but it's not always the best place we want a lot of our cards. When you do activate this card, the main card you're going to want to send from the extra deck to the graveyard is Eternity Dragon, because when that is in your graveyard, you can then banish it, and then you can protect all your fusion summons for the rest of the turn. So that is the main target from Cybernetic Horizon. Once you send something from your hand to graveyard, then deck to graveyard, then you get to add core to your hand from the deck, and then after that is when you send Eternity to the graveyard. Once all that is complete, then this effect resolves. It's a pretty mouthful of a card, but it's pretty good. Got a really basic one here, Cyber Revsystem. This is you special summon 1 Cyber Dragon from your hand or graveyard, and if you do, it cannot be destroyed by card effects. Do not forget about that ability. It does not get destroyed by card effects, or cannot be destroyed. A lot of people forget that. Great thing about this card is it does not target, so if you have multiple copies of Cyber Dragon or different Cyber Dragons in your graveyard, and you go to activate this, once you choose the card you want, your opponent does not have the opportunity to banish that or remove it from the graveyard. It has to be when you activate this card, not when you decide what card to pick. It's pretty much a monster reborn for the deck, and it's also searchable, which makes it really good. Usually 1 copy in the deck is needed. We're going to take a look at one of the newer cards, Clockwork Night. All face-up monsters on the field become machine monsters. Machine monsters you control gain 500 attack and defense. Also machine monsters your opponent control lose 500 attack and defense. You can banish this card from your graveyard and discard 1 card. Add 1 earth machine monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect of Clockwork Night once per turn. You can only activate 1 Clockwork Night once per turn. Clockwork Night pairs very well with the Therion cards, but also very well with Fortress Dragon because everything becomes machine that's on the field. And because of that, as long as you have a Cyber Dragon on the field, you can just eat away all of your opponent's monsters. And there's very little they can actually do about that. One important thing to know about Clockwork Night too is when you have Clockwork Night and Rivalry of the Warlords on the field, it kind of puts your opponent in a massive lock. Rivalry of Warlords is a continuous trap that says each player can only control 1 type of monster. Send all other face-up monsters you control to the graveyard. When you have both of these on the field, every monster your opponent controls will now be machines. Most players don't play machines, so they'll play something else. Let's say they have a Cybers monster on the field. When this card is on the field, this is not a Cybers, it's a machine. So when your opponent tries to play something else, they can't because they can only control 1 type of monster and it must be machine because of Clockwork Night. And Clockwork Night specific wording is all face-up monsters on the field become machine monsters. They become machines when they enter the field. So right now, this card, like this Kaiju, it's a fiend type. It will not be a machine until it's on the field, but it cannot get to the field because Rivalry of the Warlords prevents our opponent from summoning anything else because they already control machine. If your opponent has a monster on the field, the only other monsters they can summon have to be machines. So that is a pretty spicy lock that it puts your opponent into. Don't forget the 1000 attack and defense point swing that it does with you and your opponent's creatures. That could be easily overlooked. We might have already discussed this when we talked about Fortress Dragon, but if we have Clockwork Night in the field, let's say we have a Cyber Dragon, and we want to play Fortress Dragon, once we decide to tribute everything or send all the cards to the graveyard for Fortress Dragon, your opponent can't like quick effect or anything like that. They have to do it like before you decide you want to summon this because it's just how the priority works. So like if I were to summon Cyber Dragon Herz and my opponent has a board full of creatures, the opponent has to respond to the Herz. If they don't respond to the Herz, priority comes back to me. I decide to tribute, fusion, send everything to the graveyard to then summon Fortress Dragon. On that summon is then when the opponent can activate some more effects and whatever, but by then all their cards are already in the graveyard. So definitely keep that in mind. Don't let people try and trick you. Next up, we're gonna go over Cyberload Fusion. This is a quick play spell, so keep that in mind. You can fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck that lists a Cyber Dragon monster as material by shuffling the fusion materials listed on it into the deck from among your cards in the field and or your face-up banished cards. But monsters you control cannot attack for the rest of the turn except that fusion summoned monster. You can only activate one of these once per turn. Definitely keep in mind that once you do fusion summon with this card, it will lock you into only attacking with that fusion monster. However, if you already attacked with monsters, you can still activate this card because it only says after it is fusion summoned, so keep that in mind. Since Cyberload Fusion is a quick play spell, there's a lot of different spicy things you kind of do with it because of the timing. Obviously, one thing in like any quick play spell, you can set it on your turn and you can activate it during your opponent's turn to, kind of surprise them or something like that. Another thing you can do is during the battle phase, you can obviously attack with some of your monsters, Cyberload Fusion after they attacked, and then fusion summon, and then you get to get another monster attack in. Typically though, you won't go Chimeratech Rampage because if you do this, you won't get to activate the effect to pop anything because of the quick play spell, and you also won't be able to send anything to the graveyard to make it attack multiple times. But one really good thing you can do with this, even if it's your turn obviously, let's say you have a Cyber Dragon on the field and you play Cyber Dragon Core, and let's say your opponent goes to Imperm or something like that to try and negate its effects. What we can do is you can play Cyberload Fusion and select your two boys and then summon something like Chimeratech Rampage. And what that'll do is it'll actually protect Core's effect because that other card no longer had a target. Again, it kind of depends specifically on the card. Again, it depends exactly on the card your opponent used. However, just remember that cards like Cyberload Fusion can protect cards like Core's effect from actually activating. We typically don't get a lot of cards in the face-up banish zone. However, one obvious card here is Cybernetic Overflow. We do always run at least one copy of this card in our deck because it's untargeted removal. This is one card though that does banish Cyber Dragons, so getting them back into the deck with Cyberload Fusion is always pretty nice. And also Cyberload Fusion is searchable, so things like Power Bond, Overload Fusion, even Evolution and Burst, they are not searchable, so that is another perk of Cyberload Fusion. It's a really consistent and good card in this deck, and it being a quick play spell kind of sets up for a lot of cheeky and different plays. Let's move on to Machine Duplication. Select one machine type monster with the attack of 500 or less on your side of the field and activate this card. You can special summon up to 2 cards with the same name from your deck. So really the only options here are going to be Cyber Dragon Nachster, you got Cyber Dragon Core, and you got Cyber Dragon Herz. These 3 cards are valid targets for Machine Duplication. As a reminder too, obviously when any of these cards are on the field, or on the graveyard, they are considered Cyber Dragons. They are not Cyber Dragon Nachster, Cyber Dragon Herz, or Core. They are Cyber Dragons. So when you do target one of these cards, you actually be able to get Cyber Dragon, not just one of those. So you'll be able to get 2 Cyber Dragons. As a reminder, we discussed Clockwork Night. That does kind of turn off Machine Duplication, and the same thing with Cyber Dragon Vier. Both of these, or Cyber Dragon Fear, both of these cards do make your other machine type monsters a little bit stronger. So it does have some dyssynergy with Machine Dupe. Some people do run all 3 of these cards in the same deck, but I typically don't. You can feel free to do whatever you want, but I don't like the kind of dyssynergy between everything. Just as a reminder though, if you do have these cards on the field, you cannot activate Machine Dupe if you do target these cards because they will have more than 500 attack. One thing I want to mention too is, let's say we play Cyber Dragon Core and our opponent goes to Imperm. Well, Imperm obviously negates the effect of search, but it also negates all the effects on this card, so it does negate its static continuous effect where it is considered a Cyber Dragon on the field. So in this case, you can still activate Machine Dupe and target Core, but just know that you have to get 2 Cyber Dragon Cores. You cannot get the Cyber Dragons because it's considered Cyber Dragon Core now, not Cyber Dragon. Definitely keep that in mind. However, if it's not negated, you have to get Cyber Dragon because you can't get Core. That is also one important thing to understand too, is if this is Cyber Dragon on the field and you activate Machine Dupe and its effects are not negated, you have to get Cyber Dragon. You cannot get Core. Same thing with like Herz and Nachster. You must get the card's name. However, if its effects are negated, then it is Cyber Dragon Core, so then you have to get Cyber Dragon Core. Machine Dupe also says up to 2 cards, so you can pick 1 card if you so desire. We might have discussed this before as well too, but let's say you play Cyber Dragon Core and your opponent Ash Blossoms it. Ash Blossom negates the effect to search. It does not negate everything on this card. So if your opponent Ash Blossoms, you can still play Machine Dupe, target this, and you will get your 2 Cyber Dragons because it is still considered Cyber Dragon. If your opponent Effect Veilers, if your opponent Imperms, anything that negates all the effects will negate the static or continuous effect of Cyber Dragon Core or Herz or Nachster, changing its name back to its original name, not Cyber Dragon. Let's move on to Cyberload Fusion. Fusion summon 1 Dark Machine Fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials listed on it from your graveyard or field. As a reminder, this is a Dark Machine Fusion, which is not like Twin or End. It's either Rampage, or obviously you can go into Overdragon too, but typically Rampage is going to be your go-to card. You cannot use or summon Megafleet or Fortress Dragon off of that because of the effects on those cards. I mean, it's honestly a pretty basic card. As a reminder though, all your cards get banished that you use for the fusion summon. This definitely does work better in the Cyber Dark variants of the deck because you're going to have a lot more cards in the graveyard. It is also not searchable off core, really anything. I mean, Triple Tactics Thrust it is, but this is searchable off of that Evolution Endburst card. But again, it's not really too amazing, but it's still fun if you want to play it. Let's head on over to the best fusion spell. We got Power Bond. Send from your hand or side of the field to the graveyard fusion material monsters that are listed on a machine type fusion monster card and special summon that fusion monster from your fusion deck. This special summon is treated as a fusion summon. Increase the attack of the special summon monster by an amount equal to its original attack. During the end phase of this turn, that player who activated this card takes damage equal to the original attack of the special summon monster. Man, this card is so nostalgic and awesome. This card is notorious for going into Cyber End Dragon, making it 8,000 attack, and you just win the game immediately. Let's go into some of the rulings though. The attack bonus for Power Bond lasts as long as the fusion monster is face up on the field. If that fusion monster gets flipped face down or gets removed from the field and then brought back or anything like that, the attack bonus disappears. Let's say you got Cyber End Dragon on the field right now, it's got 8,000 attack, you summon a Power Bond, and it gets flipped face down because of Book of Moon. And then say it gets flipped face back up, it now has 4,000 attack, not the 8,000. So definitely keep that in mind. Don't forget you lose life at the end of the turn if you don't OTK. However, if you didn't win that turn, you obviously have to deduct your life points based on the original attack of the monster. Power Bond does work with limited removal. So if you play Power Bond, you special summon Cyber End Dragon's got 8,000 attack, and then you play limited removal, you will get 16,000 attack. So keep that in mind, super spicy. There's definitely not too much with this card. I really like this card a lot though because it pairs well with Cyberdark Chimera, and it is searchable off of that. It does require obviously a little more setup, and you got to discard something from your hand, so it's kind of vulnerable. But being able to get Power Bond to the hand is super fun. Also, the ability to fusion summon using cards from your hand is nice. Really nostalgic card. I think it's really good too, and it's searchable off of Chimera, which is also Chimera is searchable off of other things. I guess mostly just Cyberdark Realm and Cybernetic Horizon. Cyberdark Realm can be searched off of Core, and Core can be searched off of Cyber Emergency and other things. So it does take a little bit of cards to get your Power Bond technically for a search, but it is possible. Next up is the newest spell that we have. This is Duality. Tribute 1 lighter dark monster, special summon 1 lighter dark monster from your hand or extra deck with the same original type and level, but a different original attribute. During your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 lighter dark monster in your graveyard, shuffle both into the deck, then draw 1 card. You can only use each effect once per turn. This is a really nice card because it's a quick effect, and again, I don't really have the card right now, but I will get it very soon. Since it's a quick effect, you can activate it during the battle phase, which gives it a lot of power. It actually has a lot of OTK potential too, because if you have Clockwork Night, we'll show you some combos in a second, but yeah, you can go into a lot of OTKs. I'm just going to set up some of the cards you can kind of duality into. Cyber Dragon and Chimeratech Rampage Dragon. If you got Cyber Dragon on the field, you can just activate duality and you can special summon Rampage Dragon, but again, you will not get the ability to pop your spell or any spell and traps on the field because it was not the last thing to resolve in the chain. I guess same thing with Galaxy Soldier 2, since it is basically a Cyber Dragon. It's the same level, attribute, and type. So that's one combo you can do. Another one is either Fortress Dragon or Gizmek Orochi. That can get you into your Cyber Twin. If you go with Orochi and you attack with it, and then you duality right after you do damage, and then you special summon Cyber Twin, that is 8,500 damage, so just enough for lethal. Really nice. Let's say you have Fortress on the field with the minimum number of monsters, so it has 2,000 attack, and then you duality, and then you go into Cyber Twin. This right here is like 7,600 damage, so it is not quite lethal. However, a lot of the times you will have Clockwork Night on the field, so when you do have that, this will be 2,500 attack, and this will be and this will be 3,300 attack, so you will have over 8,000 damage. That's typically the combo you'll have, is you'll play Clockwork Night, play some Cyber Dragon, contact fuse everything away, go to combat, attack, and then you'll duality into Cyber Twin Dragon and then do a lot of damage. But also Gizmek is pretty nice too, so I'm going to be testing it out with that card. Another thing you could do is with Cyber End, Eternity, and Megafleet. If you do have Megafleet on the field, you can use duality to special summon Cyber End or Eternity Dragon, because Megafleet's a level 10 and it's Dark Machine, and these are 10 and Light Machine, so pretty cool there. Both of these won't get you to that 8,000 damage. This will be like 4, 5, 6, like 6,400, assuming, you know, no Clockwork Night and you only use one monster, but it's still pretty spicy and could get in for some pretty big damage. But Duality is definitely a great card. It is still pretty new, so I think that, you know, we'll see more testing over time, but it's definitely incredibly impactful for Cyber Dragons. It gives us a lot of different OTKs and surprises. Let's move on to Cybernetic Revolution. No, this is not the booster box, but it is the card. Tribute 1 Cyber Dragon, special summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck that lists a Cyber Dragon monster as material, but it cannot attack directly and is destroyed during the end phase of this turn. You can only activate one of these once per turn. This sounds amazing, like wow, you could just tribute a Cyber Dragon and get a free Cyber End. It's like, yeah, but it's not that amazing. But I want to talk about it because it is a pretty cool and fun card. As a reminder, this is searchable off of core because it is a cyber spell. For some rulings, the card that is summoned is destroyed during the end phase of the next turn, not the turn that it is special summoned. A monster summoned like this is not summoned properly, so you cannot revive it or bring it back from the graveyard with cards like Monster Reborn. It doesn't work. Some valid targets for this include Cyber Twin, you got Cyber End, and you got Eternity Dragon, and you got Rampage Dragon. Typically, I think Eternity and Cyber End are probably your best bet, but again, it depends exactly what you're kind of going for, what kind of board. It's a cool and fun card, definitely not amazing. There are other better cards to run out there, but it is fun. The main thing that makes this card not that good is it doesn't properly fusion summon the card, so you can't easily or cheekily bring it back from the grave. Moving on to Cybernetic Overflow. Banish Cyber Dragons with different levels from your hand face up on the field and or graveyard, then destroy an equal number of cards your opponent controls. If this card in the field is destroyed by a card effect, add 1 cyber spell trap from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect once per turn. This card is definitely really good, but typically we don't run more than 1 or 2 in the deck just because of the requirements and the things we need to get rid of to activate this card and make it powerful is pretty bad. But this is searchable and it's a great card going first. Definitely understand that this card does not target and the banish is not a cost. That's what makes this card so good. Again, does not target. It does destroy though, but it does not target, and you do not banish anything to activate this. Definitely don't forget about the secondary effect. If this does get destroyed, you do get to search. However, definitely keep in mind though, if cards negate and destroy, you will not get to search, obviously, because the card's negated. Another weird ruling is this card must be destroyed while on the field in order for you to get the search. And there's definitely some weird interactions where, like, if you chain it with something, it's technically not on the field. It gets a little dicey, but just kind of understand that if the card's on the field and destroyed, you get to search. But if it's somehow not on the field or in this limbo period, or negated, you don't get to obviously search. You can chain your own cards like Mystical Space Typhoon or Twin Twister and pop your own card in order to get the effect. It doesn't need to be from your opponents, it just needs to be from a card effect. Let's say you have Overflow on the field face down and you special summon Rampage Dragon and then you activate its effect to then pop this card. In response to your own pop, you can activate Overflow and then banish, do whatever you gotta do, kill things on the field, and then at the end of the chain, this will get destroyed and you will get the search. So definitely keep that in mind. You can use your own card effects to use its ability. If Overflow is destroyed and banished, you still get to search as long as the card is destroyed. It does not need to go to the graveyard for you to search. The key thing is it just needs to be destroyed. You can also activate this card if you have no Cyber Dragons to banish. Typically, you don't necessarily want to do that, but in case you have to or something, you can. You do have the ability to do that. Just remember, it does not target, and that is why it's so good. A searchable, non-targetable, I kill you monster, and it's pretty good. We went through a lot of cards, and there's obviously a lot of other cards you can play. However, I wanted to definitely go over the ones you're going to see the most and you're going to kind of want to add to the deck. Again, there's other cards you might want to play, but these are probably the best and what I would probably mostly consider. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of put my deck back together, and we're going to go walk through some card interactions and test hands and stuff like that and kind of get a feel for the deck and kind of walk you through my decisions. Again, I'm not an expert or anything, but I play the deck, I love the deck, so I think I have a little bit of information I can probably help you with in order to, you know, help out with your decisions and how to play the game using Cyber Dragons. Okay, we're gonna run down some test hands. However, before we do that, obviously you gotta break down the deck, kind of see what cards are running. This is my most up-to-date deck. However, Duality is not in it currently, but I did buy it in the mail. It is on its way. But for the purpose of playtesting, I can show you a lot of things without having, you know, my most up-to-date Duality build. This will be good for now. So in this build with the test hands I'm gonna show, we got 3 Cyber Dragon, we got 3 Cyber Dragon Core. We have 2 Cyber Dragon Nachster, 2 Cyber Dragon Herz, 2 Cyber Dragon Nachster, 1 Cyberdark Chimera, 2 Galaxy Soldier, 2 Jizukiru. So this is it for the monsters, and sometimes I do run hand traps and, you know, some other cards, but for the purpose of playtesting, we honestly don't really need it, but sometimes I throw Ash in there. 3 Cyber Emergency, we got 1 Cyber Repair Plant, 1 Cyberdark Realm, 1 Cyber Revsystem, 3 Clockwork Night, 2 Power Bond, 1 Change of Heart, got 1 Pot of Prosperity, 1 Harpy's Feather, 1 Call by the Grave, 2 Triple Tactics, 1 Cybernetic Overflow, we got 2 Imperm, and 3 Evenly Matched. For the extra deck, we got 1 Rampage Dragon, we got 1 Cyber Twin, 1 Eternity, 1 Cyber End, 2 Megafleet, 2 Fortress Dragon, we got 1 Cyber Dragon Nova, 2 Infinity, 1 Dingirsu, 1 Line of the Light Charmer, 1 Seeger, and 1 Salamander Almiraj the Great. Alright, shuffled up the deck a little bit. Let's see what cards we pull. We got Cyber Dragon, Cyber Emergency, Clockwork Night, Nachster, and Triple Tactics Talent. Typically, when we are playing this game, we do want to go second almost every single time, so we will get an additional draw. If our opponent knows we're playing Cyber Dragons, they'll usually make us go first, and that really stinks. So this is a pretty good hand. Let's assume we're going second. We obviously can't do anything, so whatever our opponent's board sets up, it's going to stink because we have no interaction. That's why hand traps are so good. But moving on to our turn, let's say we draw a card. We got Cyberdark Chimera. So here are some things we can do with this 6-card hand. We can use Cyber Emergency to search for core or something else, and we can even go into the OTK. We even have Chimera in the hand. As long as we have Cyber Emergency and some spell and trap in our hand, we can go into the OTK. However, this hand's pretty good, and I want to show some other things. So Cyber Emergency is really good right now because we can search for really anything. Clockwork Night is a great card too because we can go into Clockwork Night, and if our opponent has a monster, we can special summon Cyber Dragon, then immediately wipe away their entire board. So that is also a good option. We can also activate Nachster's effect to send Cyber Dragon to the graveyard or Chimera, and then we get to special summon that card because they both have 2100 either attack or defense, so they are targets for Nachster. If our opponent activates some card effect or something, we can play Triple Tactics Talent, and typically, you know, they will have some hand trap or some sort of quick effect on our turn that they'll activate, so usually that card will be live, but not always. One thing we could do too is just normal summon Chimera, activate the effect, discard just some spell or trap, and then get Power Bond, and then we can immediately go into Power Bond, or sorry, play Power Bond into like Rampage Dragon because we have valid targets. This hand is actually pretty good. We can do a lot of things. Depending on what our opponent has on the board will depend, obviously, what we're going to do. So let's assume our opponent has like 2 monsters on the field, and let's say I want to get rid of them. Well, what I can do is actually activate Cyber Emergency, and even if it gets negated, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but I'll kind of want to, you know, see what my opponent does if I play this. And typically, if they have some response, they will negate this. Or if they have Ash specifically, they will negate this because it's just really good. If I'm worried about Ash, I can go into Cyber Emergency. But the main thing that I want to do is I want to get Clockwork Knight on the field, and then I want to get Cyber Dragon on the field. If our opponent doesn't respond or do anything, I'm just going to wipe away their board because everything's a machine. So we're going to be able to go into Fortress Dragon. And that will have, let's assume, 3000 attack because there are 3 monsters. I still have some good plays here. Let's say our opponent activated some effect to destroy this, goes to graveyard, something happens. I can then activate Triple Tactics Talent and then draw 2 cards, or I can take control of their monster or look at their hand, but let's just draw 2 cards, see what we pull. So we got Core and Herz. We still have a normal summon, so we have so many things we could do here. We could even go into Core right now, grab a Cyber Repair Plant, and then go Galaxy Soldier to get into our like rank 5 play. Sorry, Clockwork Knight should still be on the field. Let's not use our normal summon yet. Let's actually activate Nachster's effect by sending Chimera to the graveyard. We'll special summon that in defense mode. This card will activate now, and we'll be able to get Chimera to the hand. Now, if we want to go Power Bond, we have to keep the emergency in the hand, so that's just something to keep in mind. We need the spell or trap to discard. From here, let's go into Cyber Dragon Core. Let's go grab our Cyber Repair Plant. Where are you? And now we will play Cyber Repair Plant because we have a Cyber Dragon in our graveyard. We will then search for our Galaxy Soldier and add that to our hand. Again, assuming our opponent doesn't have any interrupts or negates or anything, add this to our hand. The board's getting a little tight, but we'll special summon Galaxy Soldier by sending Herz to the graveyard. Galaxy Soldier will get another Galaxy Soldier, and Herz will grab another Cyber Dragon from our deck and add that to our hand. Then from here, we're going to do the same thing, send Cyber Dragon to the graveyard and special summon Galaxy Soldier. And then let's go into our go into our Cyber Dragon Nova. And then we can detach one of these to get another Cyber Dragon back to the field. You're not going to be able to see it over here, but there is another Cyber Dragon on the field. Then we can go into Cyber Dragon Infinity. We have a negate. From here, we can like link away these two. And let's go into Cyber Dragon Seeger. I'm going to move this Cyber Dragon and put it over here just so it's easier to see. I made an error before. If we play Chimeratech Fortress Dragon and we don't use all Dragon or Machine Cyber monsters, we cannot use or activate Chimera's effect because this card limits us the whole entire turn from only using Machine or Dragon Cyber monsters. So we cannot activate this, so the big sad. There's still some things we could do. We got Cyber Emergency. We can still attack. Actually, is this lethal? Probably not, but if we wanted to go for lethal, we probably wouldn't have went into this kind of board. This is more of like a stabilized board. Key thing though is we are locked into Machine type special summons because of Nachster, so keep that in mind. Most of our things are Machine. The only thing is these like 2 cards in the extra deck. That's really all. Let's run into another hand really quick. That was really good. In case you're obviously interested too, I have a lot of other videos on the channel with Cyber Dragons, so if you want to learn how to play and kind of go through that thought process of decisions you can make, got a lot of videos on those. I also have certain videos where I discuss, going first or other combo type videos. All right, let's see what cards we pull off the top. We got Overflow, Core, Power Bond, Emergency, and Cyber Dragon. So this starting hand, let's assume again we're going second. This starting hand again is not terrible. If we're going second, we really want some way to either disrupt our opponent going first or have a board breaker, so when it is our turn we can try and obviously break their board, or we're going to have a way to play through multiple negates. This hand here we can play around 1 negate really easily. 2 negates is going to get a little tricky. However, it is kind of possible. Right now Overflow in the starting hand is really bad because it does really nothing. Great card going first though. So let's draw. See, we got Clockwork Night. That just saved us. Now we can play around kind of 3 negates. The ordering that I would go for this is, again, depending on what their opponent has and what board they have, but we can either go Clockwork Night into Cyber Dragon and wipe away their board into Fortress Dragon, or we can go Cyber Emergency or Cyber Dragon Core. Now, typically, if you have Cyber Emergency and Core in your hand, what I typically do is I always go Cyber Emergency, because if it gets negated or ashed, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but you can just play Core and then grab something else. Typically, Core getting negated usually hurts a little bit more. That's just kind of my thought process with that. With this hand going second, we get around a couple negates. We also got to keep in mind we do have Power Bond, so let's say we play Emergency, even Cyber Dragon Core, and both of those get negated. Then we play Clockwork. Let's say that even that gets negated. Let's actually play through like worst case scenario here. Well, what if we go Cyber Emergency, right? It gets ashed or something. Oh, boo-hoo. Let's say we play Cyber Dragon Core and it gets impermed. Oh man, we don't search. Let's say we get Clockwork Knighted, and then this gets Ghost Ogre. It goes to the graveyard. Wow, three disruptions, pretty rough out here. Well, we still have Power Bond, and because Cyber Dragon is a Cyber Dragon in the hand, and this is still a Cyber Dragon monster, we can still go into Rampage Dragon. So even with all those disruptions, still going to Rampage Dragon. All these go to the graveyard, and then we get Chimeratech Rampage Dragon. We get 2 pops on the field, and we get to send 2 things to the graveyard. So here we will send Cyber Dragon. We'll send Herz, and we'll just send a Nachster. Not that doesn't really matter, but we'll send Herz and Nachster. Herz hits the graveyard. We're going to get a Cyber Dragon back to our hand, and let's grab the Core. The reason why I want the Core is because we have no follow-up for next turn, so at least this card will give us some sort of way of getting some other Cyber Spell or Trap to our hand. Now we got an attack and monster. It's got 4,200 attack. You can attack 3 times. We do have a level 1 and a level 4 and even a level 2 Cyber Dragon, so with Cybernetic Overflow, next turn we do have potentially 3 forms of removal, but again that kind of destroys all of our potential plays, but sometimes you got to do it. Assuming 3 negates or disruptions, we can still play Rampage Dragon and do some damage. That could still be an OTK, you never know. Typically though, it might not be. Let's go through a starting or a hand going first. Again, this is like terrible. You really do not want to go first at all if possible. However, if you do go first, your main goal is to either set up an Overflow or you want to set up Cyber Dragon Infinity. 2, 3, 4, 5. So wow, what a tragic hand. We have Useless going first. We have no way to get into the graveyard. This is one reason why this card is not considered a starter in a sense, because we can't start anything with this card. I can't start with this card because I don't have any Cyber Dragon in the graveyard, so it can't be a starter. That's why I more prefer that card as an extender. But yeah, can't even use this. So this is useless. This is useless. We don't have anything in our hand or graveyard. This is also pretty useless because our opponent isn't really going to hand trap us. I mean, they could hand trap us turn 1, but we have no summon. This is useless turn 1. Really good going second, but we have to wait till the end of the battle phase. And infinite permanence is great, or saving grace. We have to time the infinite permanence on some card or some monster that they're trying to set up with. So the timing of the infinite permanence can be pretty important, but no matter what, we're going to use it probably this turn, hopefully on a key target of the card that they're going to play. You can set this on the field, but the problem then becomes if they do have removal and this gets destroyed, it's your only thing. You're kind of taking a big risk there. Again, this is down to personal preference. You can do that if you want, but I would not in this situation unless I had some other option. Keeping this in the hand kind of keeps the mystery of what cards you have. So unfortunately with this kind of hand, we just pass. You might be asking, maybe you play evenly matched, right? However, again, I wouldn't do that because I'd rather just wait to the end of the battle phase. We don't have any face-up cards in the field anyway. There's no reason to, make it vulnerable. One thing you could do is, make a bluff, put one of these cards face down and, maybe bluff it. But at the same time, it might make a weird scenario for evenly matched if we do activate it at the end of their battle phase. But again, yeah, that's debatable. But for me, I would just keep this. So on their turn, which is the second turn, I'm going to infinite permanence just something. You gotta have some form of disruption. Hopefully we live, and then at the end of their battle phase, we'll play evenly matched. Hopefully we either get some cards removed from the field or we get some value out of that. That'd be pretty important. And then our turn, we draw a card, Cyberdark Realm. That also really stinks. So let's say we play Cyberdark Realm. Let's actually say it gets negated and destroyed or something happens. Because even if we get Cyberdark Chimera, nothing happens. We play it and then we can't fusion summon, we can't do anything. It's kind of just a blockers. So let's say it gets negated or something. We use triple tactics talent. We at least draw 2 more cards. And what does this do for us? This still doesn't do that much. We can play Herz here. Then I guess this is really the only play line. We can link it off. It goes to the graveyard. We get Almiraj. Herz effect triggers. We get to grab a Cyber Dragon from our deck, add it to our hand. So let's grab that. Now that this is in our hand or Cyber Dragon's in the graveyard, we can activate Repair Plant. So we play Repair Plant. From here is kind of tricky. Like, do we want to go in a core? We already used our normal summon. I was going to say this, however, I just realized you can't. You cannot use Cyber Revsystem to use Cyber Dragon Herz while in the hand because it specifically says special summon 1 Cyber Dragon. And in the hand, Herz is not a Cyber Dragon. So we already use our normal summon. So core right now doesn't really do too much for us. We can grab Nachster, special summon Nachster, put Cyber Dragon in the graveyard, special summon Cyber Dragon, and then we can maybe use Revsystem to special summon Herz. However, Herz, we already used the effect to search, so we can't make it level 5, so we can't go in any rank 5 play here. We could also grab Galaxy Soldier. Actually, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it, I guess that is the play. We can grab Galaxy Soldier, or we could even just grab another Cyber Dragon and use Revsystem that way. But I think this is a much better thing to do. So let's grab Galaxy Soldier, and then we're going to play Galaxy Soldier by sending Cyber Dragon to the graveyard. Then we're going to grab Galaxy Soldier off of Galaxy Soldier. We will then use Revsystem to special summon Cyber Dragon. And then we can just go into our Nova Infinity play line. Kind of typical sort of rank 5 play. So we'll go Nova, and we do have a Cyber Dragon in the graveyard, so we'll detach. This will hit the graveyard, and then we will special summon. Then we will go into Infinity. Then we could also play this face down. We do have 2 options for it. So we do have some disruption. We have a negate. We could suck up our opponent's monster. We have something to sort of protect our card. And yeah, we have at least some board, but it was not as optimal. But again, we were assuming we were also going first, which is really not ideal. Anyway, though, I'm going to wrap this video up. Hopefully you kind of learned some stuff. You had some fun along the way. I am not a Cyber Dragon god by any means. I just really like the archetype, the cards. It's super fun and enjoyable, and I do like sharing it and making videos. There are definitely a lot of other ways to build Cyber Dragon, and my way is probably not the best, but it's the way that I've been playing, and not only do I enjoy, but I guess I found out, all the little quirks and things that make the deck good and bad, when to play things, when to not play things. Cyber Dragons definitely isn't like an S tier deck. However, if you made it this far in the video, I can imagine you love Cyber Dragons. You don't really care necessarily if the deck's good or bad. You just want to have the experience of playing it, which I mutually share with you. In card games and in some other things in life, I kind of think that, I'm in the, I guess, bandwagon of doing one thing to absolute perfection. And in this case, it's understanding every card in the deck, how it interacts, what to play, what and when, what your deck does against other decks. I think understanding that to the absolute max potential gives you an edge over other decks, or I guess people in general who are only playing, you know, like meta decks. And I think the edge that like me or other people who play specifically one deck have over those people is that we know exactly everything that our deck does. A contrary argument to that though is if a card's bad, the card's bad. Doesn't matter how well you know your deck. But Cyber Dragons is not terrible. It's actually pretty good, very explosive out of nowhere, and it has a lot of things going for it. It's just not tier 1. But that shouldn't stop, you know, me or you or anybody else from enjoying the deck, playing it, and just having fun. You know, it's not always about winning. It's always, to me, it's about summoning a big snake monster and doing 1,000,000 damage, and to me, that's fun. Anyway though, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more Cyber Dragon videos. If you like this long form content, definitely let me know. I might do it for other deck techs and stuff like that. However, right now Cyber Dragons is the only deck that really I understand really at all. But if you like how I presented this information and shared it with you, definitely let me know. Give me some feedback in the comments. I appreciate everybody coming out, watching the video, and enjoying this far in. I want somebody to take Cyber Dragons to Worlds, and I want them to win. I will be incredibly happy. Hopefully that'll be me one day, but probably not. Take care, everybody. I'll talk to you all in my other videos. Stay tuned.